Welcome to Have You Heard, the official podcast of Nichols College Athletics. We're taping this on April 15th, 2020. Today's guest is Nichols College Marketing Director and Esports Assistant Coach David Leary. David and I taped this from the comfort of our homes earlier today, and we thought David would be a perfect guest during this time of social distancing and virtual learning, a time when many of us, honestly, may be picking up video games for the first time in a long time. So hopefully you guys enjoy. We take your mind off what's happening in the world for a little bit. We hope to see you back on campus real soon. We miss everybody. Hopefully you're all staying safe. We're here with Nichols College Assistant Esports Coach and Marketing Director at Nichols College, David Leary. We just finished the first season of Esports at Nichols, and we figured during this time of quarantine and just craziness in the world, who better to have on than someone who is a video game expert. There's a lot of video game playing going on with our students and just people stuck at home. So, David, just tell us how you're doing right now. How are you getting through this time, and how's everything with you?
Yeah, things are great. I mean, it is a bizarre time, and I will say, introducing esports to Nichols College was its own bizarre thing. We had a really fun, really crazy year, trying to bring a brand new competitive program to the school, and it was really my pleasure to be able to be part of it.
We're going to dive into all things esports in just a few minutes. David, just right now, we've been home for about a month now, working from home. Students have been off campus doing virtual learning. What's going on in your department at Nichols? Have you been in the office in the last couple of weeks at all, or have you been stuck at home, and what have you been doing?
So, because the internet is a crazy place, I have actually been to the office because, as with some things in esports, a bunch of social media platforms that require two-factor authentication, and I actually did. I had to go to the office just to trigger an appropriate two-factor authentication for some logins. And I'll be on campus as we get closer to commencement as well, because I'll be taking point and making sure that those things get broadcast out to students.
Can you tell us anything else going on in the marketing department at this point? As we said, there's no students on campus. On our end, there's no sports being played. So just how are you guys, keeping up content, and just what are you guys doing right now?
Yeah, it was a really interesting shift for us because, all of this happened when, just to get a little bit in the weeds, right? This is closing time for us. We have spent a year ramping up effectively to now when we're trying to actually get students to deposit and really prove their commitment to Nichols College. And the way traditionally that a small school does that is with its campus, right? One of the reasons people love Nichols College so much is the campus, is the space, is the community. And so for us, the tactic, right, my job is to get students on campus so they can meet other students, they can meet the faculty, they can meet the athletic staff, right, and actually develop those personal human connections. I don't have that anymore. I can't drive students to campus. So we basically went into content production overdrive and tried to make the students themselves, like the existing students, a bit of a replacement character, right? We try to do as many, current students sending us in cell phone videos, just updating us on their lives, just talking, sharing memories, and getting that content out there so that we can again try to show people what it is that makes Nichols College a cool place to go to school.
Sure, and it's been a challenge on our end too. We obviously, we lost our senior seasons for the spring sports, so we've done our best to try to make sure all of those athletes feel appreciated and feel special, and just try to do anything we can at this point to make their last couple of weeks at Nichols, even though they are stuck at home learning at this point, just memorable for them. Again, we've never been through anything like this. There's no playbook for it, so it's been a challenge on our end as well. We'll jump into the esports now a little bit. So when was it first brought to your attention, or when did you hear that Nichols was adding esports?
Yeah, so I mean, it's actually been a multi-year process. I joined Nichols College in 2017. I come from a tech startup and agency copywriting background, and there were rumblings, right? Because Nichols College, one of the things that is great about it is its competitive spirit, right? And part of being competitive is staying on the forefront, is trying to make sure that you are right there on the cutting edge. And so there were a few professors who had said, boy, my kids really like video games, and I hear there's all this money floating around out there for esports. Is this something the school should be looking at? And from there, it developed into a little bit of a working group. And I wasn't actually an original member of that working group until I had this kid show up in my office. I was on lunch break, and this scraggly dude, Steve Lockwood, shows up and says, hey, someone told me that you might be able to give me an internship. And I said, well, okay, what are you interested in? Where's your head at? And he was a former baseball player, so he's a competitive kid. And we got to talking about esports, and he started to talk to me about Twitch, about streaming. And that's my background, right? Content development is my actual background. Um, and so I did. So I had him intern with me for a semester, and he wrote a short ebook on the microeconomies of content production for video gamers and all of the little ways that young people could make money. Now, I don't know about you people, but when I was a teenager, I pushed a lawnmower for money, right?
I
Like
worked
that's
in a
what I did,
baseball
right?
card store.
Yeah. See, there you go, right? So the idea to me that young people can make a living in spaces like YouTube and in spaces like Twitch, and living can mean a thousand different things, right? When you're 16, it can mean a few bucks a week, right? Enough to keep yourself in gasoline. Not that young people drive, but
No, no one's driving right now.
that, yeah, right. That was my spark. That was what got me really interested in this, is seeing how all of these young content producers were building communities and communicating their story to the world through video games, which is totally new, right? Not something that could not have existed when we were young.
No.
Um, so that really is that's where I started to get interested, and I started to get heavily involved in that working group. And so when the time came to say, well, okay, we're going to pull this trigger, um, who wants to coach it? I just stuck my hand up, like, well, I want to be involved in this, mostly because I wanted to meet the young people. I mean, I'm a bit of a weirdo, right? I didn't play sports as a kid. I was a comic book nerd. And so I wanted to meet those young people on the Nichols College campus. And they turned out to be an amazing group of young people. I mean, just some really wonderful kids that we were able to try to help compete and to get better and to do something interesting.
Sure. So for those people like me who 6 months ago had no idea what Twitch was, explain to our listeners what Twitch is exactly.
Sure. So Twitch is a live streaming platform. And what that means is you can take a camera or the screen of your computer and you can broadcast that out live to the world. You can have, so you can be playing a video game, right? Sitting on your couch in your office doing whatever you're doing. And you can have a camera on you and a microphone on you, and you can broadcast the image of your video gaming with a small picture-in-picture of you, the person, and you can speak, and you can, and what you do is you develop a community, just like YouTube streamers do, right? You can react. People can chat at you. People can go in and research who you are and what it is you do. And the really good Twitch streamers, what they end up doing is building communities. They build a fan base. They're very reactive to humans. And oftentimes they're a little bit funny or they're highly engaging. And you basically turn the playing of video games into a performance and into a community building tool. And then from there are ways to monetize that built into Twitch. And where Twitch, I think, has done a really good job is in its diversity of monetization options. So you can have subscribers who are literally people who actually give you money, because that is one of the things about community building, right? It's amazing in the modern day of the internet how many people will give you $1 just for being hip and engaging and doing a good job. You can also put out you can have lists of the gear you're using, right? What is the chair you're sitting in? What is the controller you're using? What is the keyboard you're using? And you can actually directly backlink those things to an Amazon shopping cart. So anyone who is a fan of yours can click that link and go straight in and purchase that right off the bat, and you get a small cut of that. And then from there, again, because it's community building, because you're a character, there's all kinds of sub-monetization as well, right? You can sell swag, right? You can sell T-shirts. You can do things like have other pieces of media, like a podcast, which might have sponsors. You can have sponsorships actually in your Twitch stream. And that's the cats who are really good at it, they do it all and they do it big. And they end up pulling down really aggressively serious cash in order to get, once they get to that level.
Sure. I remember the first time I heard about, kids making money on video games. I had a former student worker of mine. He got into a discussion with somebody else, and I was in the group listening, and he was explaining that he would play video games, and he would be on Twitch, and people would watch him, and people would send him money, whether it's to purchase equipment or purchase suits or skins or anything like that. And I found it fascinating. And I guess there is it's a large market out there, and there's just really a lot of people doing it. I was kind of blown away, to be honest with you.
It's really interesting just to explore. I mean, if you've never done it, it's a weird experience, but I would really recommend just go on to Twitch and drop a half hour. Like that half hour you were going to spend on Facebook, go spend it on Twitch and just explore it. There's some wild content out there. But it's all very direct. It's all very visceral. It's all shared in the moment, which I really like because that gives it a veneer of truth that I think especially young people are looking for in their media.
Sure, I've been introduced to V-Bucks recently. My son he's 8 years old. He's very much into Fortnite, into Minecraft. So I know a little bit about skins and things. He's always showing me different things, and it's a little different world for me. I like to think I'm not that old, but at the same time, I think back and The Legend of Zelda was my biggest video game growing up. So there was, you had one sword, you had the wooden sword and the white sword, and now he's got 17 different things in his backpack. So it's definitely interesting to see where it's come from at this point. And I'm sure, maybe in a couple of years he's going to be on an esports team somewhere. So we've talked a little bit about Twitch and about just the money that's out there with some of these games. With the Nichols program now, so we've decided we're adding a program, we're adding this team. Where are they going to play? So let's talk about where they were going to play and how that came to be.
Yeah, so it was, because Nichols is a small campus, space is at a premium. So it was quite a ride. It took probably 3 months to actually pick the room that we ended up in. Mostly because it takes space to put 6 computer terminals, because these are not small machines, and you need a little breathing room. You can't stack people on top of each other. And so, eventually we were able to move some very gracious people around and change some offices around in order to land ourselves in Fells 214, which is in our campus center, which is a great location for us because it's very accessible, right? It's right on every student tour. It's sort of at the heart of campus. And I think one of the things that we got really lucky with, in part because I work in the marketing department, well, we have an excellent designer on staff, Steve Belleville, who was our executive creative director, who, when it came time, once we had picked the room and it came time to actually deck that room out, really stepped up and said, well, can we actually make this room pretty? Like, can this space be cool? Because one of the things we noticed when we toured other facilities is a lot of other colleges, they'll buy a couple of computers and stick them in a white room and call it a day. And that's not what we wanted out of this experience. So, I mean, our esports room is, decked head to toe in aggressive colors, in, bold purples and blues, this wonderful slime green that I absolutely love.
Can I use the term vibrant? Is that a fair word to use?
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. And so the aesthetics of the space itself are very cool. And then we took it a step further. One of the amazing IT professionals that we have on staff here, Joe Belanger, is really went out of his way to kit it out with lights. So the whole room is ringed with these wonderful LED lights that we can change at any given moment. So, like, literally, we have a game mode, which is like, okay, it's serious now. We're really getting ready to do this. Where the whole room turns this great shade of red. And, like, it's like Hunt for Red October. It's fantastic. And again, that adds to its tour appeal, right? And if you can't walk by that room and not see the light show and the big computers and the big colors and kids having fun in there and not think, well, that's kind of cool. How do I get involved in that?
It's a pretty fascinating setup.
Was a definite driving point for us.
Sure. I mean, as someone who's been in the room a couple times, so it's a pretty fascinating setup. And even for someone like myself who doesn't quite know all the equipment that's in there, I recognize like the tall towers, and I used to have one in college 20 years ago in my dorm room. But tell us a little bit about the equipment that's actually in there. Not just like cost of things, but just what were you guys looking for when you went for the equipment itself, the monitors and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, again, so the glory of Nichols College and its sort of radical student-centric nature and its competitive spirit, the IT staff was kind enough to literally look at what other schools had and, within a budget, one-up them. I mean, that was absolutely the driving mode factor.
Sure.
We chose our technology based on, well, how do we actually get the best here? We talked to a whole bunch of students about what actually mattered to them. Things like monitors and the refresh rate on your monitor are these little subtleties to technology that those of us who aren't deep into it don't always think about, but that really make it a huge difference in playing. I mean, you can tell when you're sitting in that room, you can tell if the monitor is tuned correctly or if one has gone out of whack, and it's a big difference. So the goal really was to provide the absolute best experience for students possible. Again, within a budget, and I think we were able to do that. We certainly the competitors themselves overall were very happy with what we chose.
So you guys, now we've added the program, we've got the room built, we have the equipment. We need a team. How do we find a team?
Yeah, it was so wild ride again because the students who were really into video games weren't one of the reasons we were able to argue for this is, well, we want to get the students who are into video games more actively involved on campus, but they weren't necessarily actively involved on campus before. So we had to do a lot of digging. Charles Tusignant and I did a lot of events, did a lot of, just honestly going out and handshaking and saying, hey, we're trying to put a thing together. Would you like to be involved? And so it was shoe leather, and it was fun. It was interesting to try to go and talk to those students and say, well, hey, come do a thing. And once we thought we had enough to really get started, we did an informational session, had a bunch of students come down into the athletics building, and we talked about, well, what are our goals, right? What do I think my goal is? And how is that different from your goal? What do you want to do? And from there, okay, once we started to get rolling, once we started to actually piece a team together, you got to look at, well, okay, how many actual players do you need for each game, right? Like I have to have at least 5 players to play League of Legends, which is different than I have to have 3 players for Rocket League, and I have to have, you can get away with 1 player for Hearthstone. Do I have enough people in the appropriate roles who can actually play competitively? And it was difficult at first, right? We had to really work. Literally, one of our star League of Legends players stumbled in on a practice, like had no idea, had totally missed it, didn't even know it was a thing, saw the cool colors, and we were hanging out one night and walked in and said, can I be part of this? So we, and students were joining in our last semester. One of our best Rocket League players came very late to it, but joined right in. And, I think we were very lucky that we had some really good personalities on the team to start with. Young people who were interested and open and wanted to compete and wanted to get better.
Sure. And we'll circle back on the team itself in a few minutes, but you mentioned a few of the games already, Rocket League and League of Legends. Talk a little about each of the games and kind of just how to compete collegiately at esports. There's only select games, and just talk a little about those.
Yeah, it's an interesting and growing selection of games, right? So the oldest collegiate esport is League of Legends, which I, in my sort of ignorant elderly ways, would compare to, like, I think of it as D&D. It's fantasy based. Mm-hmm. It's 5-on-5, effectively a complicated version of Capture the Flag. With a lot of really interesting strategy behind it. These are very cerebral kids. They like to think it out. They like to plan. There's a lot of in-the-moment communication. Who's doing what? Who's going where? How are we setting up a defensive strategy? And the competition there collegiately, because it's over a decade old at this point, is extreme, right? I mean, there are ripping teams out there. And I think it is to the credit of our team that they stood up and they competed every time. I can't tell you how many other teams would forfeit and just not show up because they weren't as well organized as our students were, which was a really cool thing to see. So that's League of Legends. So Rocket League is car soccer. Mm-hmm. Rocket League is a fascinating game. It is a sports game. It is a very fast-paced, 3-dimensional version of soccer. Put the ball in the net. And again, very competitive. And that is the game where we showed the most growth over the course of the year. We started out getting, pretty roundly whooped every game. But as things progressed, the team put its head down, figured out what they needed to get done, figured out how to communicate with each other, and developed that competitive bond but their performance by the end of the season was miles ahead of where we started at. It was really impressive and inspirational to see overarchingly.
That's a game that I've actually got a little bit of experience with. I'd seen it, to geek out a little bit here. They had sponsored a WWE pay-per-view a couple years ago, and I saw the
Oh,
game, and
cool.
I initially thought, geez, that is really cheesy. I can't believe they made a soccer game with cars. And then my son got into it, and he bought it and plays a lot, and you're right, it's very fast. It's a little more fun than you might think when you first think of soccer with cars. That sounds silly. It's actually quite a fun game.
Yeah, I'll say so. That was the one that I spent the most time trying. Again, as sort of older and not from this space to understand, and I have now gotten to the point where I actually enjoy watching Rocket
Mm-hmm.
League. Like it's a fun game to watch, especially once you get into it a little bit. Once you kind of know what the strategy is.
Sure. So we've got Rocket League, we've got League of Legends. Tell us what else we have out there.
Yeah, so we also fielded a Hearthstone team. Now, Hearthstone is a really interesting one because it's more traditionally a mobile game. It's kind of a Magic the Gathering deck building card game that happens to also be fairly competitive. It has a really big scene out there. There's a lot of just interesting people who enjoy the act of crafting a deck, right? A group of cards that you think you can pit against someone else's group of cards, um, and kind of again, it was an interesting thing to watch develop. That we didn't actually start competing in until this past January. And what was really interesting to me is, right, you think of a mobile game as a sort of solitary experience. You think of cards as something that is very mental, right? But the competition is 3-on-3 because of the way they do deck rounds, which I won't get into because it's complicated. But the communication that comes out in the room is, again, outright inspirational. It is 3 young people actively collaborating, even though only one is playing at any given moment, only one is driving the deck. It's 3 people thinking actively about strategy and about what their opponent is doing and how to counter it. Which was very cool. It was really fun it was just fun to be around and to help these young people try to compete.
Sure. Now you mentioned about having the meetings and recruiting the team. So now you've got a squad of kids, and you're trying to slot them into the right spots on the team. How did you do that? Did you have kind of tryouts, or did you make them play against each other, or how did you sort of slot kids into the proper roles?
So we didn't really have that luxury because we were kind of fighting for each student. Pretty much, so like in League of Legends, right? In League of Legends, you have a role, and certain people have personalities that are adapted to certain roles, and our students had to be flexible. Some people had to play roles that they weren't necessarily quite as comfortable with. In order to compete. So unfortunately, we really didn't have that luxury. But we look forward to having that luxury next year as we get, as we've developed, right, as we've gone out and recruited.
Sure.
I mean, our Rocket League team next year is going to be on point, which we're really excited about. And then also, so just briefly, like just to admit our failures, we also tried to field an NBA 2K team because 2K is kind of Nichols's game, right? It's a game that a lot of, again, because we're an athletics-driven campus, a lot of athletes play. A lot of kids enjoy spending their sort of relaxation time playing 2K. We had high hopes for fielding a team there, and we had some amazing players who were interested in competing. But we weren't able to find the scaffolding. We weren't able to actually find a competition that they could participate in effectively. So we kind of had a bit of a swing and a miss, which I feel really bad for the students themselves there. But that's one of those games where we're in this odd space of some things are sort of true competitive esports with big pools and collegiate tournaments. And some things, I mean, 2K has some huge tournaments, but they're not scaffolded well for a semester system.
Understood. So it almost seems like that might be our ace on a hole at some point down the road, is once the scaffolding's right, we've got the players for it.
I think that's right. I mean, really, because that's the one where you can actually look at campus tournaments, right? Because they can get together and play tournaments on any given Friday night.
Sure.
And some of our players are very good. It's just a matter of finding the right opportunity for them.
Very fair. So now on game days, do you know anything about your opponents going into these games? Do you know certain games, like if you play BU or you play Roger Williams, do you know, hey, they've got a strong Rocket League team, but maybe not so good at League of Legends? Just talk about maybe scouting a little bit. What do you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So It's the advantage of content production, right? A lot of these teams have put YouTube videos up. You can frequently go and watch their old matches. Um, and as you get deeper into the season, you can also see how they fared against other teams that you have played. Right. So if you know that UMass beat Roger Williams and you beat Roger Williams, well, maybe we're on par with UMass, right? So you can you absolutely can do basically scouting. You can look up who's playing. Can I find them online? If I can find them online, are they a threat? How do they like to play? How do I counter that? Which is fun.
That's interesting. I've noticed during this quarantine, there have been some Major League Baseball players who have given out, hey, I'm going to be on Twitch tonight if you want to play or if you want to watch me. Do you think any of these kids have played each other before? Do you think it happens maybe away from game day, so to speak? Do you try to ever look out Roger Williams kids or B, or am I just completely off the rails here?
I think that in their personal lives, they don't self-identify that way, so you wouldn't know it.
Sure.
Right. So one of our better Rocket League players is an active streamer, but you wouldn't know he was a Nichols College member from his personal stream.
Fair.
Because that's his personal brand. That's that's his thing.
That makes sense. Now, on game days itself, what is your role as far as the coach? What do you have any specific duties or strategies, or what do you do?
Yeah, I consider myself the wrangler of cats. I mean, my goal in any given moment is really just to make sure that the students are having a good time and have what they need, right? So early on, it was a lot of making sure logins were right, making sure everything was set up correctly, making sure people knew where they had to be, especially when we have 6 machines and 2 of our teams would end up playing at the same time. We would have Rocket League and League of Legends, which 3 plus 5 is 8. So we would literally have to find space for 2 other people. Sometimes we used laptops, and sometimes some of our guys would play from their rooms because they can hear each other, right? They can set it up with headphones and mics.
Correct.
And so, it's your job is really to be there and to be emotionally available for them, to suffer with them when they lose, and to feel great elation when they do well, which is great. I mean, because so I come from an advertising background, right? Empathy is everything to me personally. So trying to feel things with these students was a real pleasure and a real honor.
Okay. You've spoken a little bit about the environment in the game room, but just on game days, talk about just the intensity of the student athletes here and just on the coaching staff. And you mentioned trying to kind of manage their emotions throughout the contest. Just talk about game days.
Yeah, it can be very intense. I think like any competitive atmosphere, right? If you don't feel it strongly, you wouldn't bother competing. And so, especially when, if you personally feel like you could have done better, you're going to leave feeling poor. You're going to leave that room feeling like you could have done better and you wish you had, and you're replaying it over and over and over again in your head. And that sucks. I mean, it's a painful thing, but it's also a predictable thing, right? Fortunately, a lot of our players have athletics backgrounds. It's amazing how many of them are former athletes who had to stop competing because of injury, right? They take that competitive drive and they turn it to video games because that's better than another concussion. But they take that same intensity that used to propel them at 100 miles an hour down a field is now bottled up into a chair. And it's got to have an outlet. And sometimes that outlet is loud, and that's okay. Who am I to tell you you can't yell when you're mad? I can be there to be a recipient and try to be a vessel for that.
Sure. You mentioned some of your players are also former student athletes, and I say student athletes in the sense of on the field, on a basketball court, on a football field, and so forth. One of the interesting things that happened to me this year, I was in the fitness center at the athletic center on the treadmill, and I noticed the esports team was down there. And respectfully, I didn't expect that. So can you explain, you guys had actual physical workouts as opposed to just practicing in front of a monitor?
Yeah, I think that's a broad team bonding and health thing. I mean, not only do I think it's healthy for a team to work out together and to just have that actual experience of sweating, but there's also a ton of research to say that good cardio is incredibly beneficial to your performance in game. People who are physically fit, who are are therefore more likely to be mentally fit. They have better stamina, they have better control, they have better breathing, which makes them perform better. Right? There's a reason when if you dive into Twitch and you start like looking at some of these really serious professional teams, guys who straight up make a good living at this. They're all very fit. Some of them are outright ripped. And it's because it has a direct impact on your performance. Physical fitness is important. And we were really lucky that the team felt that same way. That was something we went in thinking might be a bit of a fight and wasn't at all.
So you finish up your first varsity season, and the record can be a little skewed. I believe it's technically 10-14. There's some forfeits involved there, and some interesting factors. What were the high points of the season for you guys and the team? What memorable games or matches that you remember that stand out?
Yeah, I think everything really started to take shape at the end of the first semester, and early on in the second semester. Those first, I don't even want to say the first Rocket League wins. The first time we got a really nice goal in Rocket League, which I think was against UMass, the room just lit up. It was incredible. Like, they had worked so hard to communicate and to bond as a group of people and to get better. And to have that first really hard fought loss, where it was actually down to the wire, felt incredible. Felt like all of this hard work had actually shown results, which was a really cool moment.
We haven't spoken directly about any of the student athletes on the team, and not to necessarily single kids out, but who are some key players on your team from this past season, maybe people are going to look at next year that have bigger roles?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like a lot. So a lot of our captains are graduating, so the team will look very different. But our Rocket League team, Joe is an amazing kid who was a first-year student. Who I think his Twitch handle is Tunasav, and he's a lot of fun, really interesting, very very hardcore player.
What's Joe's last name?
What's that?
What's Joe's last name? I'm sorry.
Gosh, man, I'm bad at names. I can literally pull it up if you want.
Fair enough.
So, and we have, we have some students who are, for example, who are dual athletes, right? Like we have Grant who plays on the lacrosse team for Nichols College, which is very cool. And so we have to do a little bit of balancing with him, but he's a great player and a great competitor.
Sure.
On our League of Legends team, we have our team captain, Grant Wells, who is a really good guy, really interesting person, also a comic book nerd a bit, so we have some bonding there. And the only, he's an economics major who's looking to go into policy development and law over time, which is very cool to me. Again, it's interesting to see how these hobbies kind of tail in with life goals, which is, it's a lot of fun.
Sure.
Some people like, but guys like William Rossa, who was amazing to us over the course of the year as kind of our jack of all trades. When we needed anything done, Will was there. When we needed anyone to compete, Will was there for us, which was great. And I think that was the spirit of the thing. Same thing with the captain, Nick, the captain of our Hearthstone team, right?
Nick
They were
Lemaire?
just these young men were down. They were always ready and willing, and that spirit really carried us through the year.
Now, the off-season hits, quote-unquote. What sorts of things can these student athletes do to get better or to maybe get on the active roster, we'll call it, on a game day?
Yeah, it's the same as every athlete, right? It's practice, and it's focused practice, right? It's saying, what are my particular weaknesses, right? Is my weakness communication? Is it Twitch? Is it literally Twitch reflexes? Is it my positioning? And working on those things. And one of the cool things about the nature of esports is that because so much of it is recorded, so much of it is out there, there's a ton of amazing YouTube content, right? There's really great content for anyone who wants to get better, who wants to compete. But you have to be honest with yourself. You actually have to be able to say, I am weak at X. and therefore I'm going to grind on that. I am going to sweat. I am going to put the hours in. I mean, I think that's the thing that bonds anyone who wants to be good at anything, right? I'm a firm believer that the drive to be athletic is identical to the drive to be artistic, to make music, to paint, to go out there and travel the world, and to play video games. I think it's all that need to obsess on something a bit.
Sure.
If you're willing to, yeah, if you're willing to drop hours and you can really be critical about where you need to get better, you'll get better.
I've noticed my son watching games on his iPad, whether it's Minecraft or Fortnite, people playing, and I used to think, why is somebody watching somebody else play a video game? Now, of course, I'm starting to understand that he's trying to get better at the games, and he's watching what other people do, so then he can get better as well.
Yeah, that's right. It's an interesting thing about the nature of Twitch. You are in some ways, if you are a content producer, you are in some ways actually providing a service. You are teaching.
Sure. So now that these students are in their off season, they're working on games. Tell us about the games that you played as a kid, and what did you always strive to get better? What were your first video game systems that you had?
Yeah, so I didn't have a video game system as a kid. I was an arcade child. I grew up in a tourist town in New Hampshire, and there was a straight-up arcade that I could ride my bike to. It was the top story of a barn, and my dad would give me a couple bucks in quarters, and I would ride my bike for 5 miles. And it was really fun. So I played a lot of Mortal Kombat, a lot of kind of brawlers like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles brawler.
Mm-hmm. I remember both of those games very well. The arcade
exactly.
games, yeah.
For me, it was a social thing, right? Because you call your buddy and you say, "Hey, I'm gonna ride my bike down. You come meet me," and you'd go and you'd grab a soda at the corner store and go hang out at the arcade for the afternoon. And it was a fun social experience, which is why I think I like the social aspect of modern video gaming. And I had friends who had, Segas and whatnot. I remember the first sort of experience I had being like really blown away by a video game is I had a buddy with a PlayStation, and the first time I saw Resident Evil 2, which is like a sort of survival horror zombie shooter, my mind blew. Like, this is the coolest thing. The graphics were so miles ahead of anything I'd ever seen, and the gameplay was intense. It was viscerally scary, which I really liked. It had an emotional impact, which is I think is something that's really come through in modern video games as well. I think especially in the indie video game market, now that there are so many platforms, right? Now that we all carry a video gaming platform in our pockets, there are some amazing video games made by young people who just want to make art. Effectively, they're competing, right? They're saying, I can do this incredible thing, and maybe I can make a couple bucks at it.
Sure. I think throughout this podcast, listeners will clearly be able to feel and understand your passion for the video gaming that's out there now. What do you think has kept that passion so high for so long?
That's a good question. For me, I'm one of those kind of lifelong learner style people. I like being challenged, and I think video games is a challenging space. It's always changing. It's growing incredibly rapidly. And who knows what it's going to look like in 10 years. Except that we know that it's going to continue, I think, to be an economic powerhouse.
Sure.
I think the storytelling capabilities are amazing and are just going to get better and better as the games get more and more immersive, which is really fun. And then, to me, the competitive side is this whole other thing. Like, it will not surprise me if in 10 years I am actively watching competitive video games, just because they're getting easier and easier to understand, right? Again, Rocket League is going to be weird the first couple times you watch it. It's not going to make sense. It might seem silly. It is literally car soccer. But as soon as your brain clicks into so to put this back, right? So I had this fun experience. My sister played rugby for UMass Lowell when she was in college. And I remember going to a couple of games. In the first game, I didn't get it. I didn't get it at all. I couldn't follow it. And that experience I had of, over the next couple games, starting to understand what it is that's going on. What am I seeing? What am I actually watching? Once your brain starts to click into the patterns, it gets fun. It gets to be something you want to do. And video games is full of characters, right? Every single person on the esports team, trust me, they'll make you laugh. They'll make you smile. They're all really interesting young people who have good hearts and good heads. And that to me is, I think that keeps me personally motivated.
Sure. I think I can speak to you on Rocket League again. I mentioned it before, the more I've watched my son play it, and he's a constant, Dad, watch me play, Dad, watch me play, and I kind of roll my eyes, all right, I'll come play you. But the more he gets a kick out of it, I remember when I was a kid, I used to try to get my parents to come watch me play Zelda or play Super Mario. So watching him play now, I've started to pick up on it a little more. It's definitely a lot easier than Smash Brothers, which he just annihilates me every time I play him. I just hit a bunch of buttons and hope I can punch him with it. But I think we've spoken about NBA 2K a little bit. What games do you see coming in the next few years that could be, I say, on the radar for college esports that we could jump in here?
Yeah, I think what the really interesting change that's happening in college esports right now is in first-person shooters, right? First-person shooters are traditionally controversial genre, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we were kids, it was Wolfenstein 3D and Quake.
Duck
And
Hunt for me.
yeah, you're right. That's funny. I hadn't even thought about that, but
Mm-hmm.
you're absolutely right. And there's a certain violence to those, right? There's a certain blood and guts aspect that I think colleges rightly were wary of initially.
Are we speaking of like
And
the Call of Duties and things of that nature?
that's exactly right. So those are the modern versions of that. And a lot of colleges, including Nichols, said actively, we're not going to compete in that space. We're not going to compete in something that is so actively violent, that
And
actually
somewhat
shows human
realistic, let's be
blood.
honest.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The realism of it, right? Actually trying to murder someone digitally. What I think is coming is that's going to change. There are a whole bunch of very well done first person shooters that break those rules. They break out of the realism a little bit, right? Like even Fortnite, I don't think has actual red blood in it. And games now like Overwatch, which is this incredibly frenetic neon sort of sci-fi tinged first-person shooter that is highly collaborative, requires excellent communication, requires really understanding your role in the moment in order to participate in what is essentially 5-on-5 capture the flag. Right, so even Nichols, even though we initially said we're not going to have any first-person shooters, the students came to us and said, this is what we want. We
Sure.
want to compete in this. And I think more and more colleges are going to be doing things like Overwatch,
Call of Duty,
yeah,
Overwatch,
yeah,
Fortnite.
they're going to start allowing those games in, and I think that we may get to a place where even the ones that have a semblance of realistic violence may become more acceptable because the prize pots are huge out there in the real world. Like these games are being competed in by relatively normal human beings. Pretty much all the science suggests that it's not actually detrimental to your personality to participate in these games. And they're fun, right? Capture the flag with laser blasters is pretty cool, man. Like that's a
It sounds
sci-fi
fun.
kid nerd's dream.
Sure. Dave, we've touched on so many different things today, and I got to be honest with you, I've learned a ton about esports in the last 40 minutes that we've been talking. Is there something that you want to leave us with that maybe listeners don't know, or is there a misconception about esports, or just something about the gaming world in general that we don't necessarily know about or quite understand?
Yeah, I think that young people who are gamers, even like from my perspective, even 10 years into really serious esports, there's still and are alone and miserable and wasting their time. And I didn't personally suffer that impression going into this because a lot of my friends are gamers, but I will tell you, every single student who is on our esports team is actively inspirational to me personally in their own way. They are a fascinating collective of driven, smart, independent thinking, good human beings who their hobby is video games. The thing that they love is digital. And that may not be the thing that you love, and that may not be the thing that like I choose to spend my personal time doing. Um, but it absolutely has value, and it should be respected for its competitive nature and for their raw love for it. There's beauty in there.
Sure. It's definitely something that's got a lot of room to grow at Nichols because of you and because of Charles. It's really going to take off in the next few years. So, David, this has been fascinating, honestly. It's one of the best podcasts I've done. Hopefully you had a lot of fun out of it, and hopefully our listeners enjoyed it and take a lot of out of this too. So thank you again, David, for taking the time to talk to us. This has been great.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Pete. I really appreciate all the backing of Nichols College and making it real.
Got it. Take care. Stay safe during these times, David. Talk soon.